Greetings, Artie from Artifact Electronics here. In this episode we'll be looking at a general troubleshooting procedure not involving lab equipment or game consoles, but rather a problem I have in my lab, or the also known as the Microcave. A few nights ago I was getting ready to start shooting a video and repairing some electronic equipment when I noticed an evil smell. Smells are sometimes kind of hard to describe, but this smelled like rotting meat. And the weather here in Salt Lake's gotten pretty cold. We go below freezing in the evening and at night. So my first guess was some critter looked for a shelter, crawled in here, and proceeded to die. And the chemical reaction afterwards is what I am smelling. For those of you who've experienced this, it's extremely annoying because your brain keeps screaming at you, get out of here, get out of here. But of course I had to fix my lab. So I proceeded to get dressed up like one of these guys here, because I didn't know what I was going to find, and started my odyssey. Well, I actually didn't get dressed up like these guys because I didn't have this kind of equipment and I couldn't find my fencing mask, but I did use a passive breathing mask, so I did make an attempt to keep myself healthy. But let's have a look at some of the hot spots that I checked. So I spent a lot of time crawling around the room, smelling floors, walls, ceilings, equipment, you name it. My wife squarely blamed me for this because she said, you're dragging in all sorts of equipment and Lord knows what you've dragged in here or what was nesting in some of these things and got out. And I said, no, every piece of equipment I bring in here I open up, but she wouldn't give in. She said, no, you've brought that smell in here. Oh well, not good to argue with your wife, so I agreed with her. She left, and I started continuing to check the room. My first purpose was to find the source of the smell, and after doing a lot of sniffing around, my first, or my prime suspects were, of course, there's a large air conditioning duct running through the entire length of the room here. And you can also see there's a tube for the central vacuum cleaner, another suspect, and a 300 amp AC line coming into the house, not a suspect. But after many hours, I did notice that you can see those cubby holes. Those are blind cubby holes above the air conditioning duct, and it seemed that the smell coming from there was strongest. Now, there's really nothing there. They're sitting on top of the duct and they're drywalled and they lead to the stairs leading to the basement on the other side. So there aren't any other hollow spaces there that could contain anything. But I checked and checked and checked everything that led to here and couldn't find anything. Another thing is, you can see that the duct is being fed by returns from the rest of the house, which I unceremoniously ripped off. There are several of them, and stuck my camera, my phone in there with the flash on and just filmed the inside. And I couldn't find anything. I mean, no matter how much I looked and tried and poked and prodded, it was basically, here's the pinball machine, and right above the pinball machine, the cubby holes was the place where the smell was the strongest. Of course, yes, I opened the pinball machine, I opened pretty much everything what was around here, and nothing. So finally I started emptying the room. Here's a view of the equipment shelf. Which these weren't really suspect because these all have been repaired and have been opened, but I still removed everything from the room just to see if the smell would change. And the Long and the short of it is, removing everything from the room didn't make a difference. Now, one interesting thing that happened was, when I would come into this lab in the morning, it didn't smell. It smelled a little bit, but not a whole lot. And then as the day went on and I left and I came back in the evening, the smell was in full bloom again, which at that time I kind of attributed to, hey, it's cold outside, so whatever's somewhere here is getting frozen that night and doesn't smell, and then it thaws during the day and it starts to smell. That piece of that piece of information turned out to be very significant, but my initial interpretation of it was completely wrong. So fast forward to 3 evenings spent on hunting for the smell for many hours with no results. My wife finally told me that I was an idiot and I should get professional help. And I kind of agreed with her and basically went through the yellow pages, the phone book, and called a few places. And the one that sounded best I made an appointment with. The next morning a young lady showed up, festooned with toolboxes and other things. As she came in, she looked at me and she gave me a friendly yet stern look and said, "I'm going to find it," shouldered me aside and descended into the basement, into this lab. I tried not to hover, but I couldn't help myself. I kept coming in and looking at what she was doing, and essentially what she was doing was the exact same thing that I had done and fixed, i.e. ripping open all of these returns, running tests on the central vac, doing exactly what I had done. And I would tell her, "Look, I've done this already," and she'd just say, "Yeah, I'm sure you did," and just continue with whatever it was she was doing. After about 2.5 hours, I realized that I must be running up quite a bill here, because I think they get their pricing, this company gets their pricing info, or actually all of these companies, which are dead animal removal companies, they seem to get their labor rates from Lamborghini technicians. So after about 2.5 hours, I decided to throw in the towel and tell her, "Hey, okay, fine, thank you, you made an effort, but this is getting too expensive." And even though it wasn't specifically said that the success was guaranteed, I've dealt with companies like this before, and they'll make a good effort and then say, "Sorry, I can't find it. Here's the bill." And but anyway, I came just as I was getting ready to come in and send her on her way. She called me back and says, come here quick." And I go in and she says, "I found it." And I said, "Yeah, sure. But did you read my mind that I was going to ask you to leave?" And she says, "No, she was kind of hanging from the ceiling. And what she did is she pointed at this lamp. She said, 'The smell's coming out of this lamp.'" And I'm like, "Yeah, right. I may not know anything about dead animal smells, but I know what electrical stuff smells like when it goes bad. And this is nothing like any electronic smell I have ever smelled." But, you know, she kind of grabs me and sticks my head into the top of the lamp and says, "Well, smell this." And I'll be damned. The top of this lamp gave off that rotten smell. Now this lamp, it's basically a metal Coca-Cola bucket that I put a lamp socket inside so you could hang it from the ceiling, and I thought I'd make one of my daughters happy for her college room, but both my daughters unceremoniously and firmly declined it, so it ended up being above my secondary workbench, which is the pinball machine. And so of course I took it down immediately, and while smelling it, took it apart, and here are the results. Here's a socket I removed from the lamp. There really isn't much left of the lamp other than the metal bucket, and that doesn't smell, but this thing does smell. And it smells a little bit from above, but there's a really strong smell from underneath. And you will notice that there's discoloration here. the plastic has turned brown over here, and also on the inside, if you can see it, it is uniformly turned brown. Now that is usually a result of UV light hitting these sorts of plastics. They add bromine to them as a fire retardant, and bromine will react to UV light by turning all of its surroundings brown. This is a common occurrence in vintage computers and disk drive cases and stuff like that, which after a few years will turn brown when exposed to sunlight. And this looks exactly like that. However, one of the symptoms of the bromine is not that it generates a smell. The old plastic parts that turn brown are discolored, but they don't smell. Yet this thing smells pretty badly, which leads me to believe that this may be coincidental that it turned brown. But the real problem is the smell is smells much stronger on this side. And here's a switch with a pull string on it, and right over here it smells very strongly. So my second guess is that the discoloration may be coincidental, but the heat of the light bulb, I had a 100-watt incandescent bulb in here. Before that I had a CF bulb in there. But the heat from the incandescent may have started something in here to react, and whatever that something is must contain animal product. If you have any better ideas, please leave me a comment. But it smells like rotting meat or bad fish. Anyway, once I removed this, I took it outdoors and I opened the windows in the lab, and about a half hour later the smell was entirely gone. The microlab smelled clean again, and problem found. I'm still curious exactly what caused it, but that's just an intellectual exercise. And the other thing I learned, that if I ever need to use socket bases like this, I will probably end up buying the porcelain ones, just in case that it has something to do with the plastic, and if I can, not have a switch on it, so there's not yet another element in there that can start to smell. Now it's interesting what this demonstrates about my troubleshooting procedure, in that I was so sure of myself that I was looking for dead animals, and I was obviously dead wrong. Now in the end, it still has something to do with some sort of an animal product utilized in here, that the heat or UV light, you may ask, how did UV light get here? I really don't know, but one of the bulbs I must have had in here was emitting UV light near the base, because that's the only thing that would change it like this. The plastic hasn't become brittle, so I don't think that it's become heat damaged over here. That's just the bromine you're seeing. And obviously when everything got debugged, here is a culprit, and fortunately we're done with this now, and I can hopefully resume normal operation of the Microcave. Of course I used my whole arsenal of common hand tools and power tools to dig into ducts and spaces and cubby holes and all of that, but one of my new best friends is, actually it's been a best friend of mine for a while, is this metallized tape. Because a lot of the ducts I ripped open, I cut them open or ripped them open, and I couldn't get the pieces to fit back cleanly afterwards. So I'd fasten everything in space, but there were gaps. And but utilizing this tape, I closed the gaps, did some testing, and there was very little, if any, airflow from the damaged areas. This stuff seals it very nicely. And it is made for higher temperatures too, even though this is a return duct that I worked on that only has house temperature room in it. It's extremely useful when working with any HVAC equipment. Now the reason I had this already, slight diversion here, I once built this, which is a touch keyboard, and at that time, I was just trying to prototype it. I didn't want to go out and have boards made, but essentially I used this kind of tape to make the keys, and connected the keys with a piece of copper tape, which made a good connection to the metallized tape, and I could actually solder a wire on the other end and detect the changing capacitance when you touched it. But this is, of course, for another episode where I'll talk about it. Another real useful tool that I used was my box standard cell phone. And when I was ripping open the ducts, I couldn't really stick my head in there and see anything. So you just turned the flash on and started video recording and stuck your phone into cubby holes, ducts, and whatever. And it would give you a clear view of what was in there. It can get a bit not disappointing, but disorienting when you don't know where up or down is and you're looking at the video. So make sure you remember how you orient the camera when you're filming anything out of normal sight. In my case, I can't tell how useful it was because essentially it just showed me nothing. It showed me some dusty ducts and dusty corners, but I couldn't see anything solid in there. But at least, it got rid of the frustration you see when you have a duct that has a hole in it and that you've opened up, but you can't look inside because the hole is too small. And I think the phone was pretty much the only specialized tool I used. The young lady who came, who finally fixed the problem, used her phone extensively too. But in the end, it was the nose that fixed the problem. So to sum it all up, I know this was an unconventional video, but in the end it was a electronics-related problem. And second of all, I could not continue doing anything in here until I had that problem fixed. So I thought I'd give you a really short view and share this with you. It took me many hours to do this. Many hours of frustration. To the point where I wanted to just drywall in the lab and forget that it ever existed. But persistence does pay off. Even though but logical thinking, I thought I was thinking logically about how to find the source of this, and I was wrong. So the problem was basically detected empirically, and I don't think I would have ever logically or just theoretically figured out what the smell could be. Well, now I know. There's certain cheap light fixtures or switches that are built utilizing animal products and can smell really bad. If you have a problem like this in your home, go and check everything and make sure to wear some sort of protective clothing. Don't have any skin exposed, because God knows what it is you may find. And if you're going to find a nest of critters or something, you probably want to insulate yourself against whatever is being emitted from there. Anyway, the lab is back and fully functional. Well, almost fully functional, because I dragged everything back in, and I can't find half my stuff yet. But next time we will have a more conventional episode and repair something. So don't forget the thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. And stay healthy. Bye.